Hi guys, Bill again. Well, Happy New Year. Yeah, I know, it's a bit late. As usual. I'm a little bit late with this one as well. Yesterday, Gregory Alan Elliot won his case. If you're not familiar with it, he was accused of Twitter harassment and the judge dismissed all of the charges. So good stuff. Contrary to what you're going to read in HuffPost and similar publications, his victims were actually Twitter bullies who regularly defamed him. They organised gangs of like-minded fucktards to do the same. They even dragged his family into the public arena, where they regularly attacked and mocked him. They were not harassed, believe me. Now, there's a link to the judge's findings down below. It's at the bottom of a National Post article, but if your search engine's up to the case, it's R.V. Elliot, 2016, ONCJ, 35, Ontario Court of Justice. Alright, so time to break out the bunting and celebrate. Nah, not quite. You see, each of the charges against Greg had different elements, markers if you like, that had to be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Now, the Crown actually demonstrated many of those markers had been hit. The judge accepted that Steph Guthrie felt harassed, and under Canadian law, that's the same thing as being harassed. Now, the case revolved around a whole bunch of highly technical points of law which the judge had to consider, and it led him to qualify the kind of harassment that Guthrie had suffered from, and to include it in whether Greg was actually guilty of harassing her. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you can be harassed in Canada without anyone actually being guilty of that harassment. It's an interesting point. A wee quote from the Beak himself might clear it up a little bit for you. He said that the prosecution must prove that the communication caused the complainants to fear for their safety, and that the fear was reasonable in all of the circumstances. What he's referring to is the criminal code. And what the criminal code states is that it must be established that the accused has engaged in the conduct set out in section 264 brackets 2 A, B, C or D, which means it must be established that the complainant was harassed. It must also be established that the accused who engaged in such conduct knew that the complainant was harassed, or that they were reckless, or that they were willfully blind as to whether the complainant was harassed. It must also be established that the conduct caused the complainant to fear for her safety, or the safety of anyone known to her. And it must also be established that the complainant's fear was, in all of the circumstances, reasonable. Now, it's a funny old thing, listening to that lot, that while Guthrie and Riley, the other complainant, were able to convince the old fella that they did indeed feel harassed, they couldn't con him into taking their hurt feels as evidence of any of those points. Now, they provided some evidence. It amounted to a disc full of mean tweets Elliot made. Mean tweets by themselves don't mean a whole lot. So the evidence ended up reviewing a colossal number of tweets, using some proprietary software to get into both sides of the conversation. And it turns out that Greg didn't actually go out of his way to tweet to either victim, but he did send a lot of tweets out on topics that they'd rather he just shut the fuck up about. You know, little things like their allegations that he's a paedophile, or that he's a sexual predator, or their constant insults and mockery towards him and his family. You know, things like that. Going through a vast number of tweets, the only thing the judge could find that was reasonably objectionable was one homophobic tweet and some references to Riley having a fat arse. Now, I can't say approve of the homophobic one. He didn't quote it, so I'm guessing it's quite bad. But Riley had been calling Greg an arsehole for about a month before he retaliated. Now, he retaliated about 3 times. She'd made something like 17 different tweets. Now, I'm not sure. I don't have a picture of her. I'm not sure whether Miss Perpetually Offended actually has a weight problem or not. You know, she might not. But having said that, if she wears hipster glasses, if she's prone to dyeing her hair bright colours, and if she says, "Patriarchy, motherfucker!" a whole bunch, probably the way to bet. Okay. Well, what comes next is the obvious question. Twitter, they kept out of this one. Very sensible of them. They stated what the rules were when they were asked, and they didn't take a stance in an ongoing legal case. So kudos to them. Now, they may change the rules, but I think that's unlikely. And the reason I think that's unlikely is because the Ugly Sisters were harassed by mechanisms that they were using themselves to make some pretty scurrilous accusations about Greg. Now, I'm sure that Twitter can see the opportunity to get one up on Facebook, for instance, and other social media. You know, they'll look at us, we're all about freedom of speech. But I don't think they will, because the fear of a teacup-sized tsunami developing from these social justice wankers is something that they've always got to be aware of. So, probably not. Pity, I'd like to see it. A more worrying thing is what these same social justice wankers will do about the legislature in Canada. Now, the fact that the terrible twosomes harassment amounted to crocodile tears over hurt feels isn't something that's likely to feature much in their narrative. It's more likely that some pretty hardcore damseling and white knighting about how our poor, old-fashioned justice system just can't keep up with developments in social media is what's on the horizon for us. But to be honest, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. You see, what those two numpties didn't realise is just how much their running off to the police was a lose-lose for them. It's bad enough for them that they lost the case, but losing the case isn't the worst that could have happened. Can you imagine what would have happened if Greg lost badly enough to warrant jail time? Can you imagine how much of a kickback they'd have faced? I mean, right now, most people can't even believe that it went to court. But if you give them a real victim to report on, there's a whole bunch of organisations, particularly on the right wing, who'd suddenly find they've got this enormous stick to beat a snot out of the suck just retards with. Doesn't help Greg. I mean, for him, I think it's going to be a long journey back to a normal life. They ruined him financially. His defence was actually paid for by kind people like you and like me. He used to sell his stuff to the liberal market, the liberal left, and that market's gone too. Gone forever. I doubt very much whether there's much of a market for his his particular artistic style on the right, and particularly when it comes out that he used to be a feminist. I hope I'm wrong. On the upside though, he's now allowed to use the internet again, so there's a huge potential for recovery and new customers. So it's not all lost yet. I think for the rest of us, there's a hard lesson to learn. You see, no matter how much you agree with them on individual issues, and no matter how well intentioned you think that most feminists are, don't ever, ever ally yourselves to them. Just don't do it. Because sooner or later, they'll turn on you. And when they do, it can be catastrophic for you and for everybody that you love round about you. Greg used to give these harridans valuable artwork for free. He used to offer them access to an otherwise expensive resource at a negative cost to himself. He gave them his materials, he gave them his very valuable time. And their thanks for that was to try and get him incarcerated for disagreeing with them. And what he disagreed about was them hounding and bullying an online victim, to the point where Greg actually feared that the kid might suicide. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, boys and girls, please think again. They can't be trusted. They can't be trusted to be anything other than hideous, self-entitled and an utterly reprehensible waste of oxygen. They really are the worst. Anyway, laters guys.